In exactly a month's time, the government will hold the first debate in 10 years on the prohibition of cannabis. But what could be the highs and lows of legalization? Going underground, Sebastian Pacher filed this special report.
Marijuana, the dried leaves and flowers of the Indian hempweed, is used in the form of a cigarette. Marijuana smoking, experts point out, can make a helpless addict of its victim within weeks, causing physical and moral ruin and death.
But we now know this not to be true. Marijuana is less harmful than legal drugs such as cigarettes and alcohol that kill thousands of people in the UK every year.
A recent study that compared lethal doses of a particular drug with the amount a typical person uses found marijuana to be around 114 times less harmful than alcohol.
An all-party parliamentary group led by Lady Meacher is now calling for a reform in which licensed vendors could sell regulated cannabis. Under the Human Rights Act, possession of small amounts could become decriminalised.
We're a group of 100 MPs and peers planning to achieve evidence-based drug policy. All of us recognise that the war on drugs has failed and caused untold damage in countries across the world and in the UK. We have thousands of young people with a criminal record that does nothing but damage their employment prospects and their education.
And that's not all. A petition signed by over 200,000 people to make the production, sale and use of cannabis legal will now be debated in October. What could be the negative effects of legalisation?
If we legalise cannabis, young people will perceive that cannabis is a safe drug. That will be the message that will go out there across social media. More young people will experiment with cannabis. More young people will be exposed to cannabis use in terms of seeing it on the streets, seeing it in the parks. It will be normalised in the way that drinking is normalised. And if people see that it's a normal thing and they try it, they have a chance of becoming addicted to it and they have a chance of their mental health being harmed by it. Why would we want to take that risk? When numbers are currently dropping at the moment in terms of the young people using cannabis, why would we want to mess with that? We've got a success story at the moment. Let's not mess it up.
The idea that marijuana causes schizophrenia has long been a weapon in the arsenal of the war on drugs. But a recent study by the University of Toronto has found that rather than causing schizophrenia in young men, it actually only triggers it in those with a genetic predisposition to psychotic disorders.
The UK reportedly smokes up to 1,000 tonnes of cannabis a year. Even David Cameron got high in his Eton days. If marijuana was properly regulated and taxed, it could amount to nearly £9 billion annually, with £2.4 billion in taxes alone. That's not counting the time and money that a police service facing up to 40% cuts could save by not penalising potheads, which could amass another £200 million a year.
But what about the medical benefits?
The main active chemicals in cannabis are tetrahydrocannabinol and cannabidiol. The THC is the compound that can give recreational consumers of cannabis a feeling of euphoria and relaxation, but some can experience anxiety and paranoia. CBD is the non-psychoactive chemical that has pain-relieving, anti-inflammatory and antipsychotic properties, which could be used to treat diseases such as epilepsy, Crohn's disease and multiple sclerosis.
Laboratory experiments indicate that both THC and CBD could have anti-cancer properties.
I was first diagnosed with cancer in July 2012.
I thought it was an ulcer or something like that, and they come back and told me that it was cancer.
I was diagnosed with bowel cancer.
He tells me I was terminal.
I asked him how long I'd got, and he said months.
They told me that they couldn't do no more for me, as I was classed as terminal.
Do I really want to live these next year or two on the chemo being so poorly? Or should I just stop it and enjoy my last few months with my family?
When they say that you're not going to have treatment, that just destroys you.
We're at desperate measures. I don't know who else to turn to.
I thought I had to do something on my own back. And one thing that kept popping up, and something that friends had mentioned to me in the past, was cannabis oil.
I started taking cannabis oil, which, along with the chemo, I was taking it.
Cannabis oil, which I'd never heard of until then.
I started taking the oil alongside the chemotherapy, and almost straight away, you know, it made me feel better.
I'm eating. It helps me to sleep at night.
It made me think that it is my best option to ditch the chemo and try the oil. It was only about 6 weeks after my CT scan, and my lung was clear, which was a bit weird. I've since got my medical records after, and it says nodule shows clearing, response to chemotherapy. And I was scratching my head when I looked at these, because I'm like, well, I've not actually had any chemotherapy, so that doesn't make sense.
The 2 cancers that were in my lung, they've gone. The cancer that's in my chest, in my esophagus and my stomach, they've shrunk twice.
Well, it's now getting to the point where I'm nearly 12 months cancer-free.
Anybody that breaks the law deserves to get what they get off the law. But where'd you go? Where'd you go when nobody will help you?
Frustrating from my point of view, but everything I've done was illegal.
I've never taken drugs. My excuse is I want to live.
The bonuses of it would be to tell other people out there, if they have got the chance to try it, please try it, because it's worked for me.
Any of the politicians out there, if they got cancer, what would they do? Give up?
Cannabis oil is made by separating cannabinoids from cannabis flowers using a solvent extraction process. Oil is the purest and most regularly used medicinally. It can be taken orally, vaporized, and for those who do not wish to experience the high, can be taken as a suppository. A study carried out by the National Cancer Institute on mice and rats found that cannabinoids could lessen the growth, spread, and number of tumours and kill cancer cells while still protecting normal cells in their subjects.
All over the world, countries like Holland, Chile, and even our partners in crime, the United States of America, have woken up to the benefits of legalisation and decriminalisation.
What about the countries that have stopped prosecuting drugs altogether? Since decriminalising drugs 14 years ago, Portugal has seen a huge decrease in drug overdoses, with 3 drug deaths for every million citizens compared to 44.6 in the UK.
If the failures and successes of the war on drugs are measured in pounds and people, we are definitely losing the battle. But why is the government refusing to acknowledge the benefits of bud?
Drug policy is complex, and ministers would have to clarify to the public why regulation would be very much safer for young people than the current policies. So, you know, it goes on the too difficult pile, basically. But I don't think politicians in general are against it. If you look at it, if you look at the policy, relatively briefly, it becomes very, very clear that regulation is better than prohibition.
Going underground, Sebastian Pacher. They will have to wait and see if Jeremy Corbyn, the only Labour leadership candidate to have admitted not to ever smoking cannabis, will make a difference to the parliamentary vote on October the 12th.